Assalamu alaikum, I'm Mahmoud Sameh, wait and see, and inshallah in this video I will be explaining and discussing criterion C. So the whole question of this criterion C is the effect of temperature on the reaction rates. And here and under it, he shows you a little graph that shows the relation between it. It's going to be something that is similar to your answer, but it's not but it's not directly your answer because you have different numbers. But it will be something similar. He shows you that the temperature has a huge effect on the reaction rate. So this is the goal of this graph. So your task is to perform your experiment per the time elapsed to complete RxN versus temperature, which is the reaction rate. Compare the graphs and answer the following questions. So the procedures, these are the steps that we have done in the lab previously. And this is the reaction that we have done in the lab. We put the acylic acetate. We didn't put the citric acetate. I mean the acylic acid, not the citric acid, on the Na bicarbonate, and then a chemical reaction happened, and bubbles have appeared. So from the beginning of we knew that the reaction have occurred when the bubbles appeared, and it ended when the bubbles have ended. So we should calculate the time that the bubbles have appeared in. So because that's basically the reaction. When the reaction begins, the bubble appears, and when the reaction ends, the bubble ends as well. So we knew the reaction rate by time. So when time is less, that means that the reaction rate is higher because the kinetic energy is more. So the kinetic energy makes the particles move faster, which makes the reaction rate happens faster. And the opposite, and the other way is right. When the temperature is low, for example 50 or 25, that means that the kinetic energy is also a little bit low, which makes the reaction rate happens in a less time, in more time. It takes more time to happen. So that means that the reaction rate is slow. So this is briefly all what happened in the lab session. Then we stated our hypothesis, which was the same thing as I have just said. It's the if then because, the basic hypothesis that we all know. It's the if the independent variable have affected the dependent variable, if the temperature have affected the reaction rate, then what will happen? Then, for example, the time will be less, or bubbles will appear, or these stuff, or bubbles will appear in a less time. It will finish faster, because the kinetic energy and this stuff. The kinetic energy increases when temperature increases, which makes the reaction rate happens in a short amount of time. So this is basically a hypothesis. You should write it in your own words. I recommend having a separate paper, a separate sheet away from the template, to write all of your data in it, like the table and the hypothesis and all of the questions, all of the strands that are coming. After that, after you have written your hypothesis and you have understood very well the experiment that we have done, you should head into strand one, which is collecting the data from the experiment. So you should usually, as usually, you should write the table and the graph. So this is the table of grade 10C. It may be different from other classes because it will be slightly different from other classes, but this is the table for 10C, for 10 for 10C, I guess. So after you have copied the table, or you have made your own table, you have to graph it. You have to graph it on Desmos or on Excel or in any graphing tool. The x-axis will be the independent variable as usual, and the y-axis will be the dependent variable. In our case, in our experiment, the x-axis, the independent variable, is the temperature, because it's the variable that can be changed, and it affects the dependent variable, which is the reaction rate. So when we change the temperature, the reaction rate also changes, which makes the temperature the independent and the reaction rate the dependent variable. In the table of the graph, in case you're doing it on Desmos or in any other graph, you write on the x-axis the temperatures, that you have that you have collected, which were the room temperature. In my case, it was 23 degrees, and 50 degrees and 80 degrees. These are the temperatures that you should write. The room temperature, 50 degrees and 80 degrees. Then you skip the trials the trials that you have done. I've done three trials, so you don't write them. You write just the average, which makes it only two things: the temperature and the average of the reaction rates of the time, and that's it. And attach your graph. Then strand two, which is interpret data and describe the results using scientific reasoning. You have to relate this strand to all of the data you have collected, which is the table and graph. But first, you should answer the first question, which is which temperature had a higher reaction rate. You just look at all of the temperatures, the three temperatures, 25, 25 or 20, whatever your room temperature is, then 50, then 80, and you see which one had the fastest reaction rate, the highest reaction rate, which one took the least time, to happen to finish the reaction. So while answering question number one, you should state as well. You should state also the reason behind what made this temperature. Yeah, for example, if it was 50, so you say why when it was 50 it had the highest reaction rate or the least amount of time, and how could you tell? I just said it, I think. So you should. It's really easy, and it's because the amount of you identified by the time, but you should state more reasons, and you should state the pattern. You should have evidence for this, so you should state the pattern that was followed in the graph and table. For example, what happened when the temperature increases, what happens to the reaction rate when the temperature increases, and what happens to the temperature. No, what happens? Yes, it's only what happens to the reaction rate when the temperature increases or decreases. Then strand three is it's discussing the validity of your hypothesis, whether your hypothesis was right or wrong. Your hypothesis that you have written in, previously. So you basically relate your hypothesis to this question and write if you're guessing if you're guessing your hypothesis was right, then you state why was it right, and again state the pattern that was followed in the graph and the table. Then relate your hypothesis to your data and to the validity of it. If all of this was right or wrong after the experiment, and that's it. A quick note: you should read these notes in the middle. They will help you so much. They won't affect the content itself, the info itself, but they will affect the format and yeah, your hypothesis. كده. Strand 4 is discussing the validity of your method. So the whole method, is it acceptable to answer your question in the first, which is the effect of temperature on the reaction rate? The whole method that we have done in the lab, putting the acylic acetate on the bicarbonic, was it valid to answer our question, to answer the question itself, and measuring the time by stopwatch and all of this stuff? Is it uh, is it nice to answer the question, or did it answer the question? And you should state why. Why was it not? Why, if not, why didn't it answer the question? And if yes, why did it answer your question? Thank you. Also, the same notes is written, so you should read it to كده. Last but not least, strand 5, which is the improvements that you should if you want to improve the method, what would have you done to improve this method? Of course, we have discovered lots and lots of mistakes, whether it's the stopwatch mistake or the powder. Some powders were stuck to each other, and it affected the reaction in a huge way. So you should state all of these all of these errors, there are so much error that than I just said. So there are many errors, more than what I said. So you should state nearly all of them, or what you remember, or all of them. You should state all of them, and say a suggestion to make it better and improve this this specific error. And that's it. That is basically the criterion C. You should read the task specifications as usual, and that's it. There's no the thing that كده اهو مش موجود. ماشي. So you should read the task specification. Hopefully you have memorized the picture that comes every criterion C, which is what words to use in the hypothesis, what words to use in the validity of your method, these stuff. Um, so use them. They are so helpful. They get extra levels. So yes, and these will help you so much. Thank you for watching.